All right. So we are now letting folks in. Welcome to Elections 101. My name is John Beebe, and I lead the Democratic Engagement Exchange here in the Faculty of Arts and at a university that whose name I hope gets changed soon. I hope everyone, wherever you're joining us from, is doing well today. We just had a series of very intense thunderstorms where I am, and we did not lose electricity. So I am grateful to be able to still be here with you. But if for some freaky reason we do, Ashley will be quickly picking up the slack, and she is joining us from Greece, of course. So I want to give a quick shout out to, as more people come in, to some of the amazing folks who are joining us from literally across the country. We have folks from North Grove in Nova Scotia, in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, who registered, from the Alex in Calgary, from the City for All Women Initiative in Ottawa, from Capigliano University in BC. We have folks from Elections Canada, Elections Ontario, the City of Vancouver, a number of other municipalities. We have some of my favorite people at the Halifax Public Library. I have a soft spot for all librarians who I think are amazing people and some of our great community builders these days. And we really appreciate everyone, everyone who's here because we do, of course, anticipate an election this fall. We don't know exactly when it's going to be or how long we're going to have once the writ is dropped, but we know that we need to be ready for that because we're whatever amount of time, whether it's 36 days or 50 days, it's not going to be much time. So we have a lot of folks in. We have a full agenda, so I am going to get going. Again, my name is John Beebe, and I lead the Democratic Engagement Exchange. We call ourselves the Exchange for short. And so we would love to know where you are joining us from. And so in the chat, Ashley is going to put in a link that lets you write where you're joining us from. And again, we have folks from all over, and we're really grateful for everybody who's going to be here. So at the Exchange, our mission is simple. We want to build a vibrant and inclusive democracy in Canada. But as we say, this simple mission is not easy. And we know that we cannot do it without everyone who's here with us today. And I am newish to Canada, moving from the country just to the south of us. And I just speaking myself personally, this last few years, watching events in the United States has been a really powerful reminder about how important it is for us to do the basic work that's required to build a vibrant and inclusive democracy. So I'm just super grateful for everyone who's here today because of the work you're doing. But before we begin, I'd like to share a land acknowledgement. I do this at the beginning of all of our events because I know for me, it's a reminder of the important contributions that Indigenous people have made and the deep injustices caused by those of us who've settled this land. This land that I have a privilege to call home is sacred land. I'm a new settler on this land and appreciate that it's been the site of human activity for more than 15,000 years. It is the territory of the Haudenosaunee nations, such as the Huron-Wendat, the Petun, and the Seneca, as well as the Anishinaabe, and most recently visited by the Mississaugas of New Credit. And the territory later became the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe to peacefully share and care for the resources and relationships around the Great Lakes. And as many of you probably are aware, the university where I work is grappling with the legacy of its namesake and Edgerton Ryerson's contribution to establishing the residential school system. Ryerson made important contributions to establishing public education free for all settlers, free of state-imposed religious doctrine. He, however, made a clear exception for indigenous students, who he believed must be schooled in a Christian tradition. That is a legacy I don't think we should honor as an educational institution, and I look forward to a day soon when our university celebrates a different vision. Now we are going to ask you to let us, I've asked you to let us know where we're from, sorry. So let's see where folks are from. I'm going to click on our link here. Hopefully it all works. It's our first test of our technology. All right, let's see what kind of responses. Okay. We have folks from, again, all over. So cool to see. And naturally enough, our home base, Toronto, is where many folks are from. But keep responses coming in here. And we're going to have a chance throughout this presentation to have some interactive components, because we want to hear from you and the work you're doing. Okay, next slide. Okay, so just briefly, our agenda. For those of you who love data, we got data. For those of you who are here for concepts, we have concepts. And for everybody, we're going to have a chance to network. We have a bunch of old friends who are very familiar with this work. And I hope you have enough new data here that helps you. We have a bunch of new folks with us. So I hope there's a little bit of something for everybody. We're going to start off with a bit of a who votes and who doesn't. For the data nerds out there, we're going to then talk about voting, what is changing and what is not. And just a quick giveaway. Not a lot is changing, actually, even despite the pandemic. We're going to have an opportunity for some speed networking, get a chance to meet all the incredible people who are here. And that's going to probably be one of the best parts because of the folks who are here. Then we're going to talk about voter engagement best practices. Like all of us, we're all quickly readapting to what does voter engagement look like in this short election period, given all the changing parameters around social distancing and health guidance and everything else. And then a quick highlight on some of the accessibility and job opportunities with Elections Canada. And finally, touching bases on the resources that we're going to have for you as you launch your voter engagement programs. Before I get into the content here, so in the ideal world, we would all be in a room. I could see you. You would raise your hand. I could get some body language. I could understand what you're feeling, what's going on. We're not in that ideal world. And believe me, no one misses that more than I do. This is not how I like to teach. But what we've done, we've now done this once before, and what worked super well is if you put questions in the chat there, and I will pause occasionally and give you a chance to ask questions through the chat. But we want to keep this as informal as possible. So if there are things that come up here that you want me to elaborate on, please let me know and I can stop. We have the time to have that kind of informality. All right. Now onto the presentation. The first bit of like sobering perspective. Increasing voter turnout is tougher than you think. And no more august institution, publication, the Stanford Social Innovation Review has a 15-part series on just how tough it is to increase voter turnout. And we will put the link in the chat there. This is not meant to discourage everybody. It's actually meant to inspire us to work hard and to work smart. And over the last few years, that's the part that we've really been focusing on. How can we, given our limited resources that we all have, be as smart as possible, because we know there are elements and approaches that don't work, and it doesn't make sense to pour a lot of energy into that. Now, so that's the tough, sort of not great news of just how hard this work it is. The good news is that it can be done. Voter turnout can increase. So one of the trends that many of you probably are aware of, and still sort of persists, the sort of myth persists today, is that participation in elections by young people is going down. And for many, many years, that was true. You know, from 1980 to 2015, that was more or less true, that it was coming down all those years. What we saw, though, is an incredible shift in 2011, from 2011 to 2015. So in 2011, about 39% of young people aged 18 to 24 voted. 2015, 57%. That was in this, like, I think, a global record for increase in youth voter turnout. So we assume, like, okay, 2015, there was like all sorts of hot button issues, you know, a new face, you know, for people to vote for. So in 2019, 4 years later, of course, the energy would go back down. Well, actually not so much. It went down 3%, still at 54%, a near record high for youth voter turnout in our recent history. Just for the record, from 2011, 2015, that's an 18% voter increase. I think it's the highest increase in youth voter turnout in the world, ever in history. Somebody on this call wants to, you know, tell me otherwise, that'd be great. But I'm going to keep saying that until somebody tells me I'm wrong. All right. The other good news is that people think voting is important. And this is incredibly important as we think about our voter engagement strategies. After the 2019 election, 92% of eligible voters reported that they had voted. Okay, let me say that again, because it's so, you know, it's like, wait a second. So in surveys after the election, when asked, did you vote? 92% of eligible voters reported that they did. Now, that is 24% more than actually voted, because we had a 68% actual turnout, because that's what Elections Canada tells us. But that means that 24% of people who didn't vote felt like they should have voted. And we just have to get them to vote. The people who already are saying that they voted, we just have to get them to vote. That's easier than trying to convince somebody who says, no, I never vote. So who are these folks who actually do vote? Who votes? Well, not surprisingly, seniors voted at some of the highest rates of any age category. 80% of seniors, almost 80% voted. And then young people who are in school are 15 to 20% more likely to vote than those who are not in school. So both those things not particularly surprising. There has been another recent study which I found really interesting in thinking about this work of how do we get people to participate. People who know voters vote. Now, this is, you know, sort of seems self-evident. Well, think about it. But young people, if you're a young person and none of the people in your family vote, only 19% of young people voted. Or if you are, but if you do know, if most of the people in your family voted, then 80% of young people were likely to vote. The same with close friends, even classmates. If none of your classmates, if you report that none of your classmates voted, then only 46% of young people voted. If you report that most of your classmates voted, then 82% of young people voted. So it's a powerful reminder that voting is a social activity. And the more we can increase voter engagement and voter turnout, it has a positive impact on everybody around us. And I think that that's another way of understanding that our approach to voter engagement has to be a community approach. and changing the attitudes and approaches and engagement in the community. So again, we will share the resources and sources for this study. For those of you who love data and want to dig deeper, we'll share that in our resources. Okay. I'm talking a lot here, so I'm just going to keep going. But if you have questions, again, throw them up in the chat. I can't see the chat, so I'm counting on Ashley and Yasmin and Mackenzie, who are on our team here, to flag anything that comes up there. All right. Okay, so time for a little quiz, and I'm going to give you a chance here to answer this quiz while I then talk about changes that are coming up. So how long did it take the average voter to vote on election day in 2019? So this is a quiz Ashley will share in the chat. But again, the question is, how long did it take the average voter to vote on election day in 2019? So as all of you know, we've had an incredible year, and Elections Canada, like every other major institution, has been reeling and planning and changing their plans and changing their plans again and reeling and changing their plans again to accommodate a potential election as it relates to the public health considerations coming out of the pandemic. They proposed legislation to make significant changes to how we vote in Canada. That legislation, called Bill C-19, died. So as you may know, Parliament dissolved without taking up Bill C-19. So that what that means is that Elections Canada is going to conduct an election, if one happens, as we all assume it does, this fall under the old rules. It basically is going to look the same. It's going to basically feel the same to a large degree. People might be more spaced out. People may or may not be wearing masks. But sort of the good news, bad news is if you participated or were involved in 2019, all the rules are basically are the same. Stephen Perot, the CEO of Elections Canada, assures us that they have no doubt that they can offer safe voting under the current rules. So if you knew how to vote in 2019, you should be good to go for 2021. Stay tuned. You will have more information about things like wearing a mask or social distancing, but those are going to be otherwise it's all going to be the same. All right. So how easy is it to vote? But why don't we, before I, I'm going to show the chat. Let's see. I realize I'm supposed to have a link here that I took out, so my bad. But I think if I go to the chat, I won't see the link, huh, Ashley? I want to be able to see.
I'll send you the results link. It's in the chat.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. So I'm gonna pull up the results link. Yeah. All right. Excellent. Okay. Now you're seeing. You're great. Okay. So how long did it take? Okay. Oh, we got a smart crew here. All right, I'll go. I have to scroll down. I see. Okay, so we got all sorts of. We got everything from 2 minutes to an hour, 20 minutes, 5 minutes. We're an average of 10 minutes. Got a full range. Okay, so I will show you here. So in 2015, it took 9 minutes on average on election day for a voter to vote. In 2019, they cut 2 minutes off that. Elections Canada, amazing. Hats off to Elections Canada. At advanced polling, it took 21 minutes in 2015. A lot more folks participated in advanced polls than Elections Canada had anticipated. So that's why those longer lines. In 2019, it took only 8 minutes. So they did an amazing job there of responding to the demand. At an Elections Canada office, it took 19 minutes. In 2019, again, only 8 minutes. So you see there, it really is, and that's really credit to Elections Canada for the incredible work they do to reduce barriers and make it easier for folks to participate in elections.
John, can
yeah.
you clarify? There was just a little bit of discussion in the chat about when the 7 minutes, like it starts from when you enter the poll.
Yeah, great question. And I love the detail nerds because I'm one of them. I'm right there with you. Yeah. So the 7 minutes starts from when you arrive at the polling place. They're not counting how long it takes you to get to the polling location. However, we'll share the link in the chat there. They do have data about how long it takes the average person to get to the polling location. It is, and this is part of Elections Canada's commitment on polling locations. For most folks, it is it's often, if you live in an urban area, it's someplace you can walk or can be a relatively short drive. Obviously, in some more rural locations, it can take longer depending on where you live. But they do, like they go up north and there are fly-in locations where they will fly in a whole team to set up a polling location on some reserves or other really remote communities. They will take the whole polling station up there to those communities. And that's, it's really quite impressive what they do. But yes, but this data is about once you get to the polling location. And the other thing I would note here is that it is faster if you are registered to vote. I'll talk about that next. Voter registration. Again, we're going to have a little quiz or a little test here. What percentage of electors are registered to vote? And we'll share that in the chat here and see how people respond. But the voter registration is the source of the most sort of misunderstanding myths in this work. You do not need to be registered before going to vote. I blame my country of origin. In the US, voter registration is often a huge barrier for people to register. In Canada, it's automatic for the vast majority of people. That said, it is easier if you are registered ahead when you go into vote. Now, most people are automatically, but if you have moved recently or you've changed your name or, for some reason, there are changes between, since the last election, you should check and you can easily update all of that. You can change your name. You can even change your gender identity. You can change your address, all of that. You can do that online and that will avoid time at the polls. So let's see what percentage of electors are registered to vote. What are folks saying? Okay, we have everything from 35% to 97%. All right, and okay. In fact, it's according to Elections Canada, as of November 2020, there were 96% of eligible electors were registered to vote. That's very, very high. Now, again, you may need to update your address if you've moved or had a name change or some other thing that might have updated that. And it is possible to register if you're not on the registry online. It is a little bit challenging though, so we don't always encourage people to do that, but it's worth checking if you know that you've moved. But if you haven't moved since the last election and you were able to vote in the last election, you should be set. All right. Questions on
Just that Brent mentioned that you can also register to vote when you're filing your taxes, which is helpful.
Yes. So yeah, so that's a great point. When you file your taxes, there's a little checkbox, and you could just say, yes, add me to the list of electors. And that, again, makes it super simple. And everyone should check that because there's no negative consequence to doing that. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways that Elections Canada is able to get data to automatically put you on the voter registration list. And just by the way, again, for us election nerds, in the US, like that's the gold standard, automatic voter registration. And that's what a lot of folks who are interested in increasing participation try to do, is to do automatic voter registration. Okay, so the one change that's coming is vote by mail. So significantly less than 1% of Canadians who live in Canada voted by mail in the 2019 federal election. Literally just a few thousand people voted by mail. Elections Canada anticipates this year that vote by mail will increase significantly. Now, again, moving target with all the changes that are happening and the better vaccination rates, maybe that's going to go down. But after the writ is dropped, you're now going to be able to go online and submit an application to request a ballot, what's called a special ballot. Before you had to do that either by mail or by fax. They will now make that easier to do because you'll be able to do that online. Elections Canada will mail you your special ballot. You'll get it, you'll fill it out, you'll put it into the envelopes, and then you'll return it by mail to Elections Canada before the polls close on election day, right? So relatively easy, but if there's only 36 days between the time the writ is dropped and election day, that doesn't give you a lot of time to get all of those pieces done. Elections Canada will have drop-off opportunities on election day, so you can drop off your ballots in a box at most polling stations in case you couldn't get your ballot back in time via mail. But that's sort of a safety mechanism, not intended to be your primary way of returning your vote by mail, but that's just a catch in case people can't get it back. There will be much more information about the vote by mail option once the writ is dropped, but that's the basic mechanism that will be available for folks for vote by mail. I think we're going to say that if you can vote in person, that's still probably the easiest and best. But if for whatever reason that's not an option for you, the vote by mail option is now an easier option, but I wouldn't yet call it easy. Just easier than it was in the past. Okay, any questions on the vote by mail? If anybody wants to throw something up in the chat, I'll come back to that, but because that is really the only significant change that's happening to the process. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about just very briefly is election security. So again, because of all the misinformation coming out of my country, there's now concern about election security. And Elections Canada does an incredible job of delivering one of the most secure and transparent voting processes in the world. And they do it super simple. You have a paper ballot, you have a pen or pencil, you mark your ballot, then you put it in the little cardboard box, and at the end of election day, the box is open, the ballots are counted by hand, and there are observers from all the political parties who want to observe to make sure everything goes fairly and smoothly. And those results are reported back to Elections Canada on election night. Super simple. Simple is secure. And they go to great lengths to make sure that the ballot boxes and that the paper is special paper that the ballots are printed on, all the rest of it. So again, super simple. But I think as we talk about voting in this upcoming election, I think it's incredibly important to remind people that when they vote, they can feel very, very confident that their vote will be counted and will be legitimate, and there will not be any fraud. Okay. However, it hasn't always been that way in Canada. So just a little fun, little historical background, because Yasmin and Mackenzie, who are working with us this summer, did a little historical research, and I just happen to love history, so thought I'd share that here. Between 1874 and 1878, 49 of the 65 contested elections submitted to the courts were voided. That means, like, so first of all, you had to do something so egregious that your election was submitted to the courts, and then they were in fact voided, meaning the elections were nullified and had to be redone. It's just sort of mind-boggling. In the modern era of Elections Canada Act, as far as I'm aware, again, somebody needs to prove me wrong if I'm not correct, there have been no contested elections voided by the courts. There have been contested elections that maybe have been recounts. That's a different thing. But voided means there was fraud. So how many members of the House of Commons were forced to resign because of this? If you want to put a guess up in the chat, go for it. But I will just also just tell you here, 1/3 of the House of Commons were forced to resign because of fraud at that time. Yeah, talk about confidence in democracy. Not so much. So, you know, it's not like we should go back to the good old days. All right, I'm going to keep moving here. So when is the election going to actually happen? Well, the Liberals have not been consulting with me about when the election will take place. I have my preferences, but they really don't care about that. But we, I would say, are anticipating that an election is going to be called in early August, which would mean that the election day could be anywhere from 36 to 50 days after that, which could put it potentially as early as September 13th or as late as October 4th. And with advanced polling takes place 10 to 7 days before the election. So that would make advanced polling starting as early as September 3rd and as late as September 24th. So for those of you who are planning voter engagement activities, if you're on, like we are, on a university campus, you're looking at these dates and you're thinking, oh my God, how are we going to get students engaged in that time frame? That's what I'm thinking also. So it's going to be super challenging. It really means that we're going to have to engage our communities during August and the first couple of weeks in September. One of the things we want to hear from you is what kind of voter engagement activities are you planning in the event of an election this fall? So Ashley's going to put that up in the chat there. Are you planning an in-person activities? Are you planning strictly online? Some of both? So please, this is super helpful for us to know, because we're in the process of finalizing our election readiness toolkit. and preparing materials that we're going to be rolling out, throughout the month of August, so that makes your job easier to engage your community. All right. So please go there, let us know what your plans are. And, I know people are still making plans, may not have yet plans, but if you can just give us a sense, I'm going to go to that now. All right, great. So this gives us a bit of a sense of what kind of activities people are planning. And not as many responses here. I think people may still be making up their minds or figuring this out. But yeah, we're assuming that a lot of what's going to happen is going to be online, which definitely makes it more challenging. Okay. All right. Anything else in the chat coming up that needs to be addressed? Could be addressed.
Sorry, I'm just going back. I think for now we're good. I can have a look afterwards and we can go back.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Next up is our speed networking. Right. Here, you have anything else that we have forgotten or need to plug?
I think we're good. Just to say that our latest democracy dialogues, which was talking about the question of who do you vote for and the role of debates, will be live later this afternoon on YouTube. So
okay, great. Yes, yes. So we had it just a couple of weeks ago, or even just last week, I guess it was. We had a session with the executive director of the Leaders Debates Commission, and Susan Delacourt, about the role of the debates and just generally answer the question of who do you vote for. So we're gonna leave the session open now and unmute everybody. So, it's not as great as if, again, afterwards we have some snacks and we got a chance for everybody to say hi and connect with each other and all of that. But if you want to stay and introduce yourself either through the chat or otherwise, we're going to make that available now. And I appreciate, again, everyone showing up today for this session. We'll be sending you a survey. Would love your feedback because we're going to be doing more of these as we continue to ramp up. So any suggestions you have about how to improve what we're doing here will be greatly appreciated. All right, and I hope everyone stays well, and yeah. So that's it for me. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see.
Hey, John, we met a couple of years back on the Pop Up the Vote campaign in Calgary.
Oh, yes, right. Oh, so great to see you.
It's great to see you again. Thanks for continuing, you and your team, for doing this. It's a good time to ask more questions.
Yeah.
And
please,
I was
the
person. I was the person that asked the question about what is the role of the observers at election day, and this was mostly my horror story at elections. It comes from a civic election here in Calgary, and I was representing one of the candidates for city council, and this was a very contested election that elicited the vote as it has not happened in a long time. So the lineups were huge. The people at the voting stations were not ready for such a well subscribed election. So this was 11 o'clock at night, and they just closed the the polling station because there were people still waiting in line to vote. So the returning officer at this polling station decided that in order to expedite the vote counting, he convened everybody that was in the room, so all the workers, and he proceeded to, for each polling station, he proceeded to dump all the votes in a big table, and every worker will grab as many as they can and just start counting on their own. And myself and several other observers is like, this is wrong. This is contrary to the spirit of visible public counting of ballots. What you're doing is that you're letting every worker grab as many an uncounted number of votes and responsible to nobody. Nobody can ascertain who the votes were for. And it was a gong show. It was an absolute gong show. So my question was mostly for that. This horror story is like, what can it, even as a citizen, you go, this is not right. This doesn't really preserves or protects the integrity of this vote as a process, right? But anyways, in Alberta, we're very strong-minded, and the returning officer counted all the polling stations in that location the same way, and they were like, you know, it was lost in the fog of the election day. But interesting.
Yeah, it's in situations like that, that's when you need the lawyers. You know, sorry, one second, I'm multitasking here, and somebody was just asking a question on the chat. But I know that on election day for federal elections, there will be problems. There are always, I mean, there are millions of people voting, and as I said, the one advice I have for everyone on election day, if they see things like what you were describing, long lines, or you know, other people, you know, polling officials not following the rules, that they should call Elections Canada like immediately, and/or, you know, direct message them on social media, because they have a dedicated team working at the central office whose job it is to problem solve that, right? So if you have a returning officer, or, you know, a local officer running a polling station, and they're not following the rules, which can happen, then, you know, do report that immediately. I had a staff person who worked with us in 2019 who had problems at election day, and they were telling her, oh, you're not allowed to have that kind of ID or something. And she's like, no, you're wrong. Like, I know the rules because I've been actually working on the elections for the last like few months. So I actually know exactly what my rights are. And they were like giving her a hard time, and kind of made her feel like humiliated. And she contacted Elections Canada, and they were very proactive about resolving that and making sure that somebody was sent immediately to clarify with that. But I think in those situations, yeah, my first course of action would be to reach out to the central office for Elections Canada. And I know on the municipal level it's different. It's 11 o'clock at night, and but that's, yeah. Hopefully.
And you know, I hope it's better at federal elections, but there are all sorts of power dynamics, because you are in a closed location where it's basically sealed. You can't really leave, right. And you're asked right. not to have any phones. So the back and forth, and not just myself, but other delegates were like, well, we need to phone somebody, and said, you take your phone and you're out of this location immediately. We cannot allow for you to have a mobile device. And I go, it's just all this power dynamics, and you know, our citizens like us, but then we become the owners of the power. So it's just very interesting what happens those days. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, and I think that's why it's incumbent on all of us to, you know, like that's like, again, working on the election day to So we have people who can be there upholding the standards is incredibly important. But yeah, before we sign off here, I just wanted to see if anyone else had anything they wanted to raise or say, or reactions, share. It's great. I know this online format is less than ideal, but where we are. It does allow us to meet with lots of people from across the country. That's the only thing. That's the only thing I have to remind myself. That's good. Well, as I say, please feel free to be in touch. And if there's and share this and for other folks, and Ivan, I know you're doing amazing work, and I know everyone in Calgary. And if there's other folks in your networks who you think would benefit from this, or there's other particular workshops, that's what we're in the process of doing now, is organizing our workshop schedule for what we anticipate is the election period. And we're happy to engage. I will say we don't have as many resources as we did during the 2019 election, but we are determined to make it as easy as possible for community organizations and local leaders to participate.
Sorry, John, I'm gonna jump at the opportunity of continue talking. I promise I'll let other people speak. But I would like to say that one of the resources that has been most useful is, I think you had this on the on the previous election, is a sheet somewhat official looking with your logo at least, right? That we can take to all our events. It says, these are the forms of identification valid to prove your identity. Because usually that's the challenge that we find with people that are either homeless or transient, is that they don't have the usual driver's license, which are expensive documents in our province. So something to that, and we have organized clinics later for nonprofit organizations to give what is the proof of address, so the people can go and procure forms of ID. But that is of a lot of use, because again, people that have been turned around, they go, oh no, they won't let me vote because I don't have a driver's license. I never own a car, but they want a driver's license. So thank you. That could be of a lot of use.
Yes. Yeah, no, and that's a great point, and I'll make sure we also emphasize that in future workshops. So I think that was probably like Elections Canada has a really good sheet, just a one-pager. And the other thing that Elections Canada does on that is they translate it into at least 42 different non-official languages, including a number of Indigenous languages. So that one sheet, I know what sheet you're talking about, and that's the one that they translate the most into the number of different non-official languages as well. So that makes it available. And I know it's available in other formats like Braille and more accessible, like large print and other accessible formats as well. So that's a great point. And I think we'll make sure that people know about that. But all right, I am going to sign off, but thank you all. And we will see you on the campaign trail. All right, take care.